Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Howdy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Amanda, I think Carmen's raising her hand for some reason.
Hold on, let me mute here.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I just unmuted. Carmen, did you need to be moved over?
Yes, please. I didn't
Okay.
get the invite.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, well,
No
I'll
worries.
go ahead and promote you right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me see who we have in attendance so far. So we have 1, 2, 4. Okay. So, other. Okay, so Madam Mayor, this is Amanda. So it seems as though we have all members on the Zoom meeting at this time, and I'm going to go ahead and begin recording, and you can begin this special City Council meeting when you're ready.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so we are ready to begin tonight's Gardena City Council meeting, special meeting for Wednesday, January the 26th, 2022. Let me just read this here before we do the roll call. In order to minimize the spread of the COVID-19 virus, Governor Newsom has signed AB 361. Please be advised that the council chambers are closed to the public and that some or all of the Gardena City Council members may be attending this meeting telephonically. If you would like to participate in the meeting, you can participate via the following options. The first way is to view the meeting live on Spectrum Channel 22 or online at youtube.com/City of Gardena. The second way to participate is prior to the meeting. You can email our Deputy City Clerk at publiccomments@cityofgardena.org by 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting and write public comments in the subject line. The third way to participate in the meeting is via the Zoom webinar. You can join the meeting on the internet by going to https://us02wb.zoom.us/82-959-724270. Also, our telephone number via Zoom is area code 669-900-9128. The meeting ID number is 829-5972-4270. Press the number 9 for the raise your hand feature and 6 to unmute when prompted to. If you wish to speak live on a specific agenda item during the meeting, you may use the raise your hand feature on the item you wish to speak on. For non-agenda items, you will be allowed to speak during oral communication. During public hearing, which we're not having tonight, you'll be allowed to speak when I open the meeting. Members of the public wishing to address the City Council will be given 3 minutes to speak. The City of Gardena thanks you in advance for helping us to take all the precautions to help prevent the spreading of the COVID-19 virus. So at this time, I'd like to ask our City Clerk if you could do the roll call, please.
Mayor Serta.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Tanaka.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Cascanian.
Present.
Councilmember Francis. Here. Madam Mayor, all members of the council are present.
Okay, so next we're going to go on to item number 2, which is special meeting. Item number 2A. We're going to turn this over at this time to staff.
Certainly, I guess I'll go ahead and start. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the council. Tonight's item is a public hearing item with staff recommending that the general plan be amended with the adoption of the six-cycle housing element. About 2.5 weeks ago, this item was previously presented to the Planning Commission. It was approved 3-0, recommending that the City Council adopt the same. The housing element being presented tonight is a culmination of numerous public meetings, workshops, staff and consultant hours that first started back in about December of 2019, well before I arrived. And so I commend the staff and consultants for all the hard work that was done to get the city to this point. Prior to opening the public hearing and receiving any public testimony, there will be a joint presentation by the city's consultant, Veronica Tam, and senior planner Amanda Acuna. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Veronica Tam, who will initiate the presentation.
Great, thank you. I would like to give an overview of the housing element. Amanda, can you forward to the next slide? Yes. So for tonight, I'd like to give an overview of the housing element, especially for the benefit of some residents who may not have attended previous meetings before. And then we wanted to over HCD's review of our draft housing element. And then finally, we would like to talk about process and timeline in finishing the housing element update. Next slide. Next. Housing element is part of your general plan, is one of the required elements of the general plan pursuant to government code. What separates the housing element apart from the rest of the general plan is that the housing element has to be reviewed by a state agency for compliance with state law. And the agency responsible for that is the State Department of Housing and Community Development. The housing element is also a little different from the rest of the general plan in that it has to be updated every 8 years on a statutory deadline. We are working on an 8-year housing element from October 2021 to October 2029. The deadline does have a grace period of 120 days, which ends February 11 this year. The housing element also has very prescribed content pursuant to state law. We have to look at the existing and projected housing needs in the community. We need to look at resources for housing development in the future, particularly looking at what are the sites available for housing development based on your land use policy and zoning. We also need to look at potential constraints to housing, particularly focusing on governmental constraints. You are legally obligated to mitigate governmental constraints. We also need to look at all these housing policies, land use and development standards from a fair housing perspective. This is new state law. And then we also need to evaluate what the city has been able to accomplish in the past, what works and what doesn't work in the city. And lastly, we need to develop goals, policies, and programs to implement over the next 8 years in order to facilitate the provision of affordable and decent housing in your community. Next slide. When we send the housing element to the state for review, there is a key component of that review, and that is the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, RHNA. No jurisdiction would be able to get a certified or compliant housing element from the state without meeting the Regional Housing Needs allocation. For the 6-cycle housing element, the 8-year planning period, the city has been allocated a very substantial RHNA, 5,735 units, much larger than what you had previously experienced in previous cycles. The RHNA is divided also into income categories, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income. And that is not to say that you have to build these units by these income categories. A city it doesn't function as a developer. You don't produce housing. You create an environment with your land use policies and your development standards. You create an environment that can allow housing to occur, and that you remove governmental constraints, you remove roadblocks for housing production. These income categories is the state uses density as a default kind of proxy to feasibility. When we talked about, can you move on to the next slide? Sorry. Before I go into the details about the RHNA, just to give you a little bit of context about what very low, low, moderate income is. Very low income are people who make about 50% of the area median income. Low income are people who make about 80% of the area median income, and moderate income are people who make about 120%. So now if a household of 4 in Los Angeles County, a moderate income household can make $96,000 and still consider just moderate income in LA County. Next slide. As I mentioned before, that when you have a RHNA allocation by income categories, it's not expecting that the city will build all these units by all this income, because you don't have the ability to finance all the affordable housing. But you have to create land use policies, and that would be considered adequate to facilitate housing for that income. And specifically for Los Angeles County, for a jurisdiction of your size, over 25,000 population, the default density is 30 units to the acre. You must have zoning that allows at least 30 units to the acre to be considered feasible for lower income. So when we identify sites for meeting the regional housing needs allocation, we need to have sites that meet the default density of 30 units to the acre or more. For moderate and above or moderate income, the density can progressively be lower, less dense. The city, under its current zoning, does not have enough capacity for regional housing needs allocation. I'm going to pass it on to Erica, and she's going to kind of go over the city's strategies for meeting the regional housing needs allocation using the concept of overlay. Erica? Oh, Amanda, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Too many cities, Veronica.
Yeah. Yeah, so as Veronica said, I'm going to go over the strategies on how the overlays that Veronica just went over in meeting our regional housing need assessment. And so basically what we've done was look at areas within the city that we could put these overlays on. And distinctively, there are 4 different overlays. And even before this, some background, as Greg mentioned, we started doing workshops and bringing the council and planning commissioners in to get their input on where they decided to see these overlays throughout the city. So these are the final outcomes of what we have from all of those meetings combined. So again, out of the 4 overlays, they increase in density. So the lowest being density of 12 to 20 units per acre, and gradually to the maximum would allow for about 51 units to 70 units per acre. And we concentrated those overlays along the major corridors. So you'll see here on the north side of Gardena, between Crenshaw Boulevard and Vermont Avenue, and El Segundo down to Vermont. Focus the areas again along Crenshaw, Western, El Segundo, some areas along Vermont as well. And you'll see that other sites that are hashed out, those sites are not necessarily included in our sites inventory. However, those sites will later down the line, when these zone changes happen within our zoning map, they will allow for that overlay to be put on those properties. And we did that so there's a consistency throughout our zoning map. But again, the sites that do not have those hash marks are counted in our inventory. And again, same strategy throughout the city. And as you can see, it's really dispersed throughout Gardena, but again, along major corridors here towards the center of the city, more areas along Western in Crenshaw, and around specifically here is around Marine Avenue. As you move further down, more sites along Western Avenue and Redondo Beach. Specifically, I believe the large site here is a site that's been identified in the city's previous housing elements. It's the Bank of America site where there's a surplus of parking. So a really ideal location if somebody wanted to allow for that housing development. So again, those sites would be identified in the new cycle and the 6 cycles housing element. Further down, we again concentrated along Western Avenue, having the overlays. And here specifically the overlays of 05, which allows for 31 to 50 units per acre. But more along Normandy, you see a lower density of 21 to 30 units per acre. And that came from, comments from the council and from the planning commission to see not much of a higher density along Normandy, being a smaller corridor as compared to Western Avenue or Crenshaw. So that's what is included in the city's inventory. And last section of Gardena is just south of Artesia Boulevard. And we have somewhat of a different situation in these areas. The first being that all the overlays shown before you throughout the city would be that they would be overlays that wouldn't rezone those properties, but just add on an additional zone to allow for housing. However, there are two sites identified in the city's 6-cycle housing element that will be an actual rezone, meaning that the underlying zoning district of those parcels will go away. And the only zoning district at this time would be the what's called the 06 zone. And that's because this area, again, noted here, is within what's called the Artesia Corridor Specific Plan. And as the council knows, there's currently a project going on in this specific plan area that will, along with that and other reasons, the specific plan will be dissolved, and all these properties along Artesia between Normandy and Western will get a new zoning designation to match what's on the ground. But again, within the housing element, the two sites marked here are going to have that new overlay and are identified for to meet, again, our RENA number. Other things down here in highlighted here in the orange and in the light blues are areas within currently our, I believe, our home business zoning districts, which will allow for a limited amount of housing, but seeing the need for more housing and in those areas, we went ahead and would again put in an overlay, not rezoning these properties again, but having those overlays to allow for more housing development. And that's really the end of the maps. And so I'll go ahead and turn it back to Veronica.
Thank you.
Excuse me, this is Councilman Cascadian. Can I ask a question very quick, or we'll wait until at the end and then we'll ask questions?
You can ask a question, that's fine.
Okay, very quick, Amanda. You know, when you go this last the slide, you know, on Western and 182nd, you know, that overlays that you put in orange and blue, that area, I mean, completely, it's like 100% or 90% of it, it's all industrial zoning. I mean, how are we gonna manage to, put apartment buildings or, units over there?
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, so, I mean, maybe I should have mentioned this as well. Throughout the city, we really focused on the commercial and industrial sites to put in these overlays. And again, the overlays will not get rid of the underlying zoning district. So like industrial, like you're right, these properties down here do have zoning that allow for industrial, and then those will not go away, but this will be an added overlay to allow for, if anybody wanted to acquire those properties, they could develop housing on them. But in no way will it, remove the industrial zone that's currently there.
okay. One more thing. Let's say a business over there, industrial business. For example, there is the metal company over there, right on the corner of 187th and Western. Let's say if the business closed down and nobody came to do the same business, like a year or two later, do they lose their grandfather, the zoning, as far as like, how on the major corridors you can't do any more mechanic shop because, that's it. If it's not grandfathered, that you cannot have another permit to do it. Is that the same case I'm understanding on this or no?
Well, no, because the zoning will still be there.
Okay, so the zoning will still be like commercial or industrial?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, I got it.
This is just another one, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
So Veronica, I'll go ahead and.
Sure, thank you. When we completed the draft housing element, the draft housing element was required to send to the state for their review for compliance on the draft. They take 60 days to look at that. And so back in December, we got the comments back from the state relating to the housing element. And in the next few slides, we're going to generally describe the comments and how we responded to those comments. Next slide. The affirmatively furthering fair housing is one of the new requirements in the housing element law, and we did comments from the state that they wanted us to expand discussions on with local knowledge. In addition to data, they want us to provide more context to the local knowledge about the history and some of the patterns in the city of Gardena. And so we have expanded the Appendix E to address their comments. There are a couple of technical questions on the needs assessment. Specifically, they want to have more information on housing cost burden or overpayment, they called it, and housing conditions. We revised the needs assessment to provide additional information on both topics. Then the next set of comments relates to the site inventory for the arena. They want the city to more clear to clarify a little bit more about the progress towards the arena with the pipeline projects, and also expand discussions on realistic capacity and suitability of the site. Section 4 was expanded. We clarified the income level of some of the pipeline projects. We expanded discussions to show examples of recent development and pending projects in the R3 zone, how those particular applications and projects have all been able to reach maximum density. We also include examples of recent residential development in commercial and mixed-use overlay, and also in industrial zones where people are requesting to do rezoning or through specific plan. So those trends demonstrate the feasibility and trend in development in the city of Gardena. Next slide. The next slides relate to governmental constraints and also primarily related to how the city processes housing and what are the development standards. We added a program in the housing element to include a replacement housing component pursuant to state law, even though we're not anticipating a lot of demolishing of existing residential uses to make room for new residential uses. But that is a requirement, so we added that component to the housing element law, housing element programs. The state wants us to talk about appropriate development standards to allow development to reach the allowable density. We added discussions about the city's parking requirements and site requirements, and we certainly will, when the city actually pursue the rezoning of these properties, there will be appropriate development standards established. The state also wants us to talk a little bit more about like typical single family homes, how is that being processed in the city? And we added the discussion about single family homes being ministerially approved. We also added recent amendments to call for the city that calls for city council review of properties or projects requiring 2 council members request. When it comes to environmental constraints, we added discussions about hazardous sites relating to regarding remediation, how the city has been able to development in the city has been able to fully remediate hazards on sites in order to pursue development projects, particularly residential projects in recent years. Next slide. We also have a comments from the state about your zoning provisions for persons, housing for persons with disabilities, specifically for two topics: reasonable accommodation and also group homes for 7 or more persons. We have added in the housing element plan section of the housing element a program that you would look at how you're going to provide for or permit or conditionally permit group homes for 7 or more, and that you will establish a formal reasonable accommodation procedure. Right now, the procedure is not really formalized in your zoning code. The state also want us to add in some additional program actions in 3 housing element programs, and we expanded that to one to include new noticing requirements for apartment projects that may be at risk of converting to market rate housing. We added new additional incentives that the city may consider in the future to facilitate housing development. And we also expanded program 4.5 to include additional incentives and monitoring for accessory dwelling units. Next slide. And so in terms of process and timeline, I will pass it back to Amanda. Actually, I can just go over that. It's relatively short. When we updated the housing element, we had the draft housing element available for 3 weeks before it was sent to the state, and the state has received it on September 27th, and it initiated their 60-day review. In November, at the end of November, we got the comment letter from the state, and we spent the next month in December to get the revised housing element. It was available I think that at the end of December, we had a planning commission meeting, which recommended the council to approve the housing element. And we will hopeful that the housing element will be adopted tonight. And then we will submit the adopted housing element to the state before the February 11th deadline. Next slide. And Amanda? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. So at this time, that ends staff's presentation. And so staff recommends that the City Council open the public hearing, receive testimony from the public, and adopt resolution number 6542, adopting the city's general plan, amending the city's general plan and adopting the 6th cycle housing element. But at this time, staff is available for any questions that the City Council may have.
Okay. You know, I think I should go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Let me correct a mistake I made when I was reading the information as far as those who want to participate in the public in the meeting. I mentioned that we will not be voting on a public hearing tonight, but we are having a hearing. So let me just clarify, this is a hearing. We are open now. And does any member of the council have any questions that they'd like to ask? No? Okay. Madam City Clerk, do we have anybody from the public that has any questions?
Madam Mayor, I do not see any hands up, so no.
Okay. If there are no questions or comments at this time, can I get a
for the city council? Just a couple. You mentioned just for my own clarity, you mentioned pipeline projects. I don't quite understand that term.
I can answer that question, Councilmember Francis. So as part of our the housing element, we listed the projects that were while we were developing the plan. We listed the projects that we either had applications for or currently in the entitlement stage into our housing element to count towards arena, because we knew those projects would be either approved and or under construction during the 6th cycle period, so the 2021 to 2029 period. So those pipeline projects are included to count towards our numbers.
For example, the Gilad project that you approved, the apartments on Crenshaw, all those apartment units will be counted towards the 2021-2029 cycle because the building permits were not issued previous to July 1st, 2021.
On Crenshaw, I mean the ones on Elsagon and Crenshaw, that one you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So they're not going to be counted toward our arena numbers, or they would be?
They will be counted towards the 2021-2029.
All right. And
I also want to mention a letter was received by the city. I think it was distributed to all the council right before tonight's hearing from Matthew Gelfand of Californians for Home Ownership, complaining that our housing element still doesn't comply with state law. Veronica, I spoke with her before the meeting, and she's verified that this is the letter that's been received by almost every jurisdiction from this group. This was the same group that filed letters against every city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance as well a couple of years ago up and down the state. As Veronica indicated, if our element is not found to be compliant by HCD, we'll bring it back for further revisions. But we feel that we've done everything we need to do, and Mr. Gelfand hasn't provided any suggestions in his letter. He complains that over 50% of the affordable sites are on land that has been developed, but this is Gardena, 99% of our land has been developed. So that only makes sense.
And the urgency ordinance that was just was that passed? The urgency ordinance?
The one on SB9?
No, that was an opposition to SB9. The other one where it talked about the subdivisions.
Yes, that's SB9 ordinance. You did that 2 meetings ago. You adopted and passed that. And we will be bringing that back in March for a study session to see if there are additional development standards the council would like to add in addition to what we've already put into the ordinance.
So that becomes one. Well, no, the one just from last meeting. Beginning one that it was in response to SB9. Is that, are we talking about?
Councilwoman Francis, the resolution that you guys adopted last night is a resolution in support of the initiative pertaining to local control. And
right.
Remember,
yeah, but the one, I don't have the number. I should have brought me. The one we just talked about, January 11th. It was the urgency ordinance that. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure Attorney Krantz.
That's the urgency ordinance pertaining to SB9.
And
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm clear. What's the question pertaining to the urgency ordinance?
Okay, so that one that became a part of our general plans. Is that a part of this house element? Does that go into it as well? I'm just trying to figure out everything that goes in there now. And with the response to SB9, we also approved the resolution in opposition to SB9. So how does that impact our housing element? What happens if SB9 goes away? Because there are several cities that have filed lawsuits against it. So does that impact our housing element at all, or no?
No, we didn't. Our housing element was underway and sites were being identified before SB9 was passed. So we didn't make any assumptions regarding additional housing units based on SB9. There is an assumption in the housing element that over the 8-year period, we'll have a certain number of ADUs built based on our trends for the last 3 years, but no assumptions for SB9.
And that's what that urgency ordinance was all about, because I think they had to do with subdivision of the lots, and that it would pretty much bypass city council approval. It was a ministerial type approval, just go straight to community development?
Our urgency ordinance for SB 9 implemented the state law, which applies regardless, to allow 2 units per lot and a subdivision of single family residential lots. So you could wind up with 4 units per lot. And the purpose of the urgency ordinance was to place standards onto the development of the houses and the lots and the setbacks, which wouldn't have otherwise been in place.
So that was a piece that you pulled out of SB 9 and that we voted, well, I was opposed to that, but became a part of our municipal code, our zoning code, right?
That's correct. It's part of our zoning code now.
All right.
And our subdivision.
And SB 9 had no effect on our housing element, no impact.
No.
Okay. And the only other thing that I guess probably caused me greatest concern is just seems that as we go from El Segundo going south, the number of high density units, they also increase. And I am also concerned about, I think one of the goals of the green housing was to, at least I saw it talked about low income to moderate type income. And I'm just trying to figure out where in our housing element are we making allowance for that? Because affordable income is, it takes on a whole new meaning in today's market. I think you mentioned something like you have to make about $96,000 a year in order to just be moderate income. So what about folks? Is there somewhere in our housing element that's going to take care of that? Or for folks that aren't quite there?
Amanda, can you put up the first slide for the maps, and maybe Veronica can address the issue?
So let me go back to the map. Sorry for the. But I think in response to your question, Councilmember Francis, as you've seen throughout the maps, the housing units that we have to account for are really spread out throughout the city, but that's also in regards to the affordability levels as well. So they're throughout the city. We accounted for those units within the overlays, but I'm not sure if that answers your question or if you had.
I think the affordable units, the affordable sites are in the 04, the 05, and the 06 zones. Is that right, Veronica?
Yes, and what we have done, 03, the density itself doesn't really meet the affordability requirements in terms of the site capacity. In the presentation, we talked about using density as a default or as a proxy for feasibility. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you cannot have affordable housing in the 03 zone. If a nonprofit comes in, or if in the event that you do adopt an inclusionary housing policy, you will still get affordable housing in the 03. But in terms of based on density alone, the 04, 05, 06 are where we provide for the opportunities for affordable housing. However, because you do have a fairly large RENA, and we don't want to concentrate affordable housing in particular locations. We try to do a mixed income strategy when we're allocating the income units throughout the city, throughout 04, 05, 06.
Yeah. I was just, it just seems to me I saw more dark blue on some parts of the city, not so much spread on other parts. And the other question that Councilmember Castaigne referred to about building on the industrial land, the industrial properties, and mm-hmm. and mediation with that. Do we have to? If it becomes just one particular area, can that be expanded to other industrial areas? Where am I clear? Am I being?
I'm not entirely sure about this particular question, but I do want to kind of offer some of the experience that we've seen, this round of the RENA is so enormous and almost impossible for a lot of communities. And they are doing what you're doing. There's no land, it's all built out. And a lot of jurisdictions are going into the commercial land and industrial land and rezoning it for residential development or mixed use development by doing an overlay. As part of that effort, we have interviewed a lot of developers about their perspective. And one question that we specifically ask about industrial properties. And the example is like the city of Rosemead, El Monte, and all of that. Their arena is large and they have to do similar strategy as you are doing. And we interviewed developers and they basically said, that housing is in such high demand, and especially when you build housing for the younger group and like more moderately priced and smaller units, if it's a good design and if it you have good security, they have never had problem having those units being occupied, and so they didn't have any issue with that. They feel that generally, like this is where a lot of communities have to do in order to get housing built and meet the regional housing needs allocation.
And just two more. Thank you for your patience with me. Just a couple more questions. As we build housing, I'm also concerned about, our infrastructure and supporting all the new housing and where will people shop. And is there a part in here we talk about commercial type developments or some areas where because the housing was, it just like it's just, I guess it's just total housing and that's it. And it doesn't, we don't have a discussion about where people shop or where we're going to put the impact on infrastructure in terms of public safety and sewage and everything else. So, but you don't have that discussion in the housing element. Is that okay? So the housing and Troy ignores.
I think maybe Lisa can talk about the process for the rezoning, which I assume will conduct EIRs and look at all of that issues.
That's correct, Veronica. And we've already kicked off the consultants to start working on the next steps, which will be the general plan land use update and the zoning to place these designations and zoning on these properties. As part of what the environmental impact report will look at will be our infrastructure capacity to determine what it can handle, what the upgrades will be, and if we need to impose development impact fees on developments to help pay their fair share cost of infrastructure. EIRs don't look at the impacts such as where people will be shopping.
I'm sorry, that was my concern. I'm just, I know EIRs don't have any impact on where people are shopping. I know that part, environmental, but can I just hop in for a minute before we go down that road too far? We're talking about environmental justice. How does environmental justice, what's the intersection between environmental justice and our housing development and the way housing element, the way it looks right now? How does that speak to where things are located, high density, does it speak to, creating a balanced approach to high density areas or zoning? Or does it have anything to do with that at all? Because I know there's something new that talks about environmental justice.
Veronica?
I think definitely environmental justice is an issue. I think ultimately there is a balance between the need for housing and the mandates that we're facing with regional housing needs allocation. When it comes to environmental justice, I think the important thing that we have to, the city would have to pay attention to is the efforts to remediate. And also the efforts to, in your future improvement plans, for example, when you're doing your consolidated plan, when you're spending your CDBG funds, when you're doing some other funding, be mindful of improvements that needs to complement the residential development in these areas. And also you may also want to think about definitely what is the on and off site improvements that would be required for future development in those areas. But we are trying to balance two different requirements of the state, and sometimes competing and conflicting. And I think given the circumstance that you have, or the situation that you have, this is the best strategy that you can have in terms of meeting the housing element requirements.
But it doesn't speak to density, doesn't have any environmental justice, doesn't speak to density at all. It has no relationship, or?
It doesn't necessarily speak with density alone. It speaks with whether you're overly concentrating. Mm-hmm. And that's what the city is trying to do when it's selecting sites. We're trying to make sure that we are distributing it in the geographic areas, like more spread out throughout the city. It also the focus is really on the disproportionate concentration, and that's what environmental justice really is focusing on.
Council Member Francis, thank you for giving me the opportunity to make a plug. We are working on our environmental justice and our update to our safety plan. Tomorrow night, there's a workshop at 6 o'clock, which has also been noticed as a joint Planning Commission City Council meeting in case there's a majority of either body that wishes to attend, where there'll be a presentation on the environmental justice element, which is on the city's website. And then the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation on February 1st on those two elements of the general plan. And it will come before the City Council on February 22nd if we stay on plan. But I urge everybody to go online and take a look at the environmental justice elements, because certainly we welcome input of the council and of the public regarding that element. But very timely, since that workshop's at 6 o'clock tomorrow night.
Just quick. So once the housing element, I'm just trying to get the order of things here. So once the housing element has been approved, then the environmental justice does that impact that at all, or we kind of do it all together, or I'm just trying to figure out how the whole cycle goes. Or does it, say if something came out in the environmental justice part that says, well, this isn't proportionate, or this isn't proportionate across the city, and does that change the housing element at all, or it just kind of stays? It says, okay, well, we identified that, we recognize that, and that's it. And does that make sense?
Lisa, do you want me to just?
Yeah, could you take that, please?
Yeah. That's a very fair comment, and that is unknown. I assume, because I'm not working on your environmental justice element, that is unknown. In the event that that you have an issue with specific areas, and if you want to, because you haven't actually done the rezoning yet. You're proposing the candidate sites for rezoning into overlay. So you haven't actually done the rezoning yet. When you are doing the rezoning, I assume that's actually going to go more on parallel tracks with the environmental justice element. In the event that you, or maybe one is ahead of the other, I'm not sure. But in the event,
we expect environmental justice to be adopted by the end of February in accordance with the statutory guidelines.
So that means you are going to be definitely ahead of the zoning. Mm-hmm. So in the event that in your environmental justice element that you identify certain things that you want to adjust your overlay, you do have the ability to do that. But when you adjust the overlay, which has already been reviewed by the state agency, what you would need to do is when you adjust the overlay, when you adopt the rezoning, you have to make a finding that even with the adjustments, you have the ability to meet your regional housing needs allocation, and that would be submitted to the state as well, that finding. So that, then if you have the ability to meet your RENA, even with the adjustments, then you don't have to do anything else. If your adjustments are big and you no longer have the ability to meet the RENA, then it opens up the whole housing element process again.
Okay. Ms. Ham, I thank you for all your hard work and effort. I remember from the first time I looked at this, the maps, and I thought, but it looks a whole lot better than when I first saw it. And I can see all your hard work and your efforts into making sure that we respond to the state appropriately and in a timely manner. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
I would love to take that credit, but I cannot. It's all staff's work. And in selecting the sites, it's a lot of hard work from your staff and Lisa and Amanda and all. I trade emails and texts that I text at them like midnight. But it's really entirely staff's work in getting your overlay to the point where you have right now.
Well, you certainly did take good leadership over because you were the consultant. So I think you've earned your keep. Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions or comments?
May I have a question?
Go ahead.
Attorney Krantz, where's the environmental justice thing on our website? Which heading is it?
Amanda? Unmute, yeah.
Yeah, so it is, there's a number of things, or ways you can get there, but best way would be to Google City of Gardena Environmental Justice. It'll be the first thing that pops up. Or on the city's website, you can, in the search engine as well, you can type in environmental justice. It's also listed on the city's general plan page. So that's under our, I believe, zoning information under community development.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any more questions or comments? Okay, that being said, at this time, we're going to go ahead and close the hearing. And can I get a motion to adopt resolution number 6542?
So moved.
I'm sorry, who said that? Rodney?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Madam City Clerk, there was a motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Tanaka and a second by Councilmember Kaskanian. Will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Kaskanian,
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson,
Yes, I think we need to put the environmental justice plan a little bit easier to find. There's too many clicks to go to it. It's more than 3 clicks to get to it. But yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis,
Yes.
Mayor Serta.
Yes. Okay. So thank you guys all, everybody who was involved in this here. A lot of work, and glad we got it passed. Okay. So next we're going to move on to public comments. Madam City Clerk, do we have anybody from the public wishing to speak at this time? I'm sorry, you muted?
Sorry. No, Madam Mayor, we do not.
Okay. So at this time, we're going to move on to item number 4, which is adjournment. So the Gardena City Council will adjourn to a joint special meeting / workshop on Thursday, January the 27th, 2022, which is tomorrow. And so at this time, we are now adjourned. So thank you, guys.
Recording stopped.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good
Hi,
night.
everyone.
Night, Gil.
Good night.
Be safe.